Betsy asks, what is the best exercise for struggling with quad development? You want to take that first?
Okay. So if you're struggling with quadricep development, there could be several reasons. But I would tell you, like, in just a general sense, what you'll find with struggling muscle groups, and actually I probably would say this is for any muscle group, really, is training in the extremes. Training in the extremes. So meaning that training the quadriceps in the lengthened position and the shortened position. So take, for example, somebody like Bryce here, who has these really long femurs. So imagine Bryce in a squat, a barbell squat or a hack squat. Think of how long his femurs are and if his tibia is short too, the limitation there about getting the knee out over the toe in the bottom of a squat or a hack squat. And I can actually attest, so I've watched Bryce squat, like a heel elevated squat, even with the safety bar, and doing everything right, and it's just a ton of adductor magnus for you.
Right.
So it takes him quite a bit of concentration in a hack squat, even with his heel elevated in the hack squat, to try to really make sure that all he's using is quadriceps. So just from like a structural standpoint and things like that, that can be a limiting factor, but you've got to be able to hit the quadriceps in the lengthened position and the short position. And the short, when it comes to leg extensions, what I find also in the leg extensions, besides people not bracing and holding themselves into a hip flexion, they kind of let themselves bounce at the top, and they also are missing out on that short. And you'll see it every time, Betsy, when you go to the short, try to get into that leg extension position, watch your foot and it will come up and you'll do one of this thing right here. That's not getting short. Short is squeezing into it and trying to pull that patella back and getting it and holding it. That is short, not this little thing there. That's not spending any time there.
Right. So to add to kind of what Adam said, maybe simplified a little bit, is aside from structural issues, because that's going to be the main limiting factor for a lot of people, is like structurally they're just not meant to train quads adequately, which is kind of my case. But outside of that, you can have control of several things in your training. So if you have a weak body part, it's your quads. Number one, be in control of your tempo, okay? So people aren't in control of the eccentric part of the negative well enough, okay? And in addition, they're not spending enough time in the parts of whatever the exercise selection could be where it's hard. So think about your leg extension. Parts at the top, right? Spend more time there. The squat, pretty dang hard at the bottom. Spend more time there. Master those spots, okay? Will you have the best quads in the world? No. But will development be forced to happen in some way, shape, or form if you're creating intent in the quads like you should be? Absolutely. You're increasing your chances. That makes sense. So I see a lot of questions here, guys, about how do I develop the quad sweep? So, got anything you want to add to that? Okay. The quad sweep. So a lot of that stuff is really covered in our level 2 camps, guys. So if you're interested in like specific questions as to what part of the quad I can target, I suggest you come to one of our camps. You can find that on MI40gym.com about the dates that we have to the year. But basically, you're talking about the quad sweep as the lateralis part of the quad, okay? You can't really specifically target a part of the quad because they are all pulling exceptionally equally throughout the range of motion. But there is some research saying, and we talk about it in level 2, that those are the muscle fibers that you're going to tap into most, like the grinder sets on leg press.
Leg press, mid-range.
That's the only thing I'll really say to that. Outside of that, if you want a quad sweep, you just got to train your quads well, man.
Right.
All right.
And you know what? I tell you what. If you ever see Ben Pakulski have a hard leg session, and you see guys that have the quads and they're straight up and down and they don't sweep, and they're going to go my genetics, blah blah blah. That's a cop out. That's a cop out. I don't care. That's that's dismissive right there.
Absolutely.
But when you watch Ben Pakulski have a hard quad session, and everybody goes, okay, I can hit that lateralis with a leg press, so they load it up and do it. Sometimes it just comes down to you are just not working hard enough.
Right.
I mean, I have seen Ben fall out of a leg extension, and you almost have to pick him up off the floor, and then he's going through 6 sets of safety bar, heel elevated squats.
Right.
When he's getting ready in shape, and you just sit there and you go, That's what it takes to have some of the best legs in the world. It's just hard work. And if you come to a camp, and all of you will attest that have been to a level 1 camp, we have that smash leg session.
Right.
That's just a little piece. Workout after workout, working those quads like that. Sometimes it's just quad sweep, hard work. If you want big quads and you're training your legs once a week, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
I don't care.
We actually have a question about that. So what's the maximum frequency of hitting legs per week? Okay. Adam probably has more experience with this coming from a powerlifting background than I do in a sense, because he's around a lot of people that will train the squat in a sense multiple times, 3 times, maybe 4 times a week. So you can kind of give your opinion on how frequently you would think would be beneficial. I'm imagining that the question is pertaining probably to hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Okay. But in that environment.
Yeah, and I tell you what, let's take it let's get into it just a little bit, just a little down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody's goal is transformation.
Right.
Right? And we're coming in and we're doing some full body work. As part as like quads or hamstrings, you're coming in 4 days a week and we want to get lean, we're probably going to do something for legs every workout.
Yeah.
Every workout. Our sessions this morning with our clients, each one of us did something for legs.
Right.
Every workout.
Right.
You know, and if any of you are familiar with Charles Pakulski or anything, and like the things that Coach Kassem preaches here in German body comp, we do a lot about here. So we're going hamstrings into a pull, like a back movement, quads into a press. So as far as getting lean for somebody, I'm going to train their legs every session.
Right.
Now, go into hypertrophy, something like that, you know, and maybe if somebody's their hypertrophy or bodybuilding, man, you got to think, what's your ultimate goal? If your legs are a weak area, you got to hit them often. And there's nothing wrong with somebody hitting quads and hitting delts in the same workout. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why people think, oh, it's just a quad workout. You know, you can get so much more into those sessions. Frequency, up your frequency on your training.
Right. Yeah, you have to consider like how well your skill is at the time. That's like my simplest suggestion I can give you. So all Adam is speaking to is like, the quads are a weakness, you're obviously not pretty good at contracting them. So think of it as any sport, okay? If I'm a basketball player and I suck at free throws, am I going to shoot 100 shots on a Saturday every Saturday? Or am I going to shoot 10 free throws every day to make that skill set in a little bit better? So it's the same thing with your quads. It's a skill, okay? This is a sport just like anything in and of itself. So if you want to get better at the skill of getting your quads to contract better, eliciting more damage on them, which ultimately means fat loss, muscle growth, more energy usage, you have to do it more frequently. And that goes for any body part. So a lot of the times, what we have, not to go too left of center, with clients in here is that they've been doing that bro split way too long, okay? And they have these goals of, hey, I want to lose fat and I want to build muscle at the same time. And sometimes it's going to be other extreme where it's like, okay, we're going to train a little bit of legs every day, but in a much lower volume. So that has to be considered, is that if you're going to do them more frequently, you can't do them in as much volume. You can't have these 20, 30 set leg workouts, but what you can have is 6 to 7 sets each workout of finally high quality sets rather than 6 to 7 sets and then 13 sets of garbage where your form is crappy, right? Your output sucks. So you're benefiting yourself here. Your quads will grow from that, okay? So let's see what else we have going on here. So we've got a couple questions about the heel wedge. Daniel asked about the heel wedge, and then we had a prior one from Jake. Okay, so speaking on these, Jake asked, what do you recommend? Or do you recommend the heel wedge, and if so, why? And in addition to that, Daniel asks, how do I find the right height for a heel wedge for his squat? Okay, so let's preface this before he answers this by saying both of these answers, all these answers are going to be relative only to training the quads. This is for a quad dominant squat, okay?
Yeah. So, and I'll keep things a little simple. With the heel wedge, what you're trying to do, if I'm trying to train my quads in the squat, I'm going to break at the knees first. And the goal is to get the knee out over the toe. Somewhere along the line, people think that that is wrong. Too much stuff on the internet. It is not wrong to go knee over the toe. It's okay. So you've got to get the knee over the toe to get that quad in that lengthened position. Now, the heel wedge is going, everybody knows that's going to give me a little bit more dorsiflexion and ankle range of motion. And that's the good, simple answer to it. Another thing that people don't realize with the heel wedge, it's also giving some people this artificial length to their tibia. So now if somebody has a long femur and short tibias, they're really limited on how far they can get that knee. But all of a sudden, with the heel lift, we add just a little bit of length and a little bit of ankle mobility. Now we can really get that knee over that toe. So that's really getting that quad into that lengthened position, the bottom of that squat.
Right.
You know, do we want to get in how we select the heights?
Yeah, I guess I can give like a simple approach to that.
Yeah.
The first thing you have to know, and that's why it helps to be able to have access to come in here, guys, is when you guys, if any of you guys come to the clinic this weekend, you guys are going to get explanation, like in a first-person feel on what it's like to know where you can actively squat. Okay, and that's the first thing you have to assess: how far or deep can I go in my squat without things breaking down? Okay, so why that's important is because in order for me to choose the right heel wedge, essentially what I'm looking for is once I make that break of the knee, and like Adam said, it's going forward away from the hip, out over the toe, my hip is going to start to flex, right? It's going to start to bend as it descends. So if I have the right heel wedge, my knee will be completely in the bottom of its flexion, its knee bend, and my hip will be at the end of its hip bend, okay, at the bottom of my active squat. Okay, it sounds complicated. In a sense, it kind of is, okay? It takes some time to figure it out from person to person, okay? But if you don't know, I would err probably on being a little too tall in your heel wedge than too short, because at least your knee flexion will run out of room first. If your hip runs out first, you're going to be probably more susceptible to breaking down in the core, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a breakdown in the hip, and then you can start to shift your, what is actually initiating the movement.
Right.
So what he's saying there, in an ideal with your active range of motion of the squat, that your knee going out over the toe and the hip, you'll hit at the same time in the bottom, basically, with hip flexion. So, guys, what happens is if I have a very, very high heel wedge and I drive the knee forward, eventually my knee will be done going forward. It's done, but then people have this perception in their brain that they need to go lower. My knee doesn't necessarily go out any further over the toe. I just break and bend at the hip. But if I have it set perfect, the knee's going out and I kind of hit this nice, active range parallel squat kind of at the same time. And if it's too low, you can end up getting into a bunch of hip flexion and still in the bottom have more knee flexion to give.
Right.
So it really comes down to looking at it. When we do it here, we test several heel wedges and everything. But just remember, if you choose a high heel wedge, like Bryce said, you're going to get on that quad. You're going to get the knee out over the toe very quickly. And you might end up from the side looking like you're doing this partial range of motion squat because the knee's already done. And that's okay. That is fine. It's a quad squat. Now, if you're using this as a guy who wants to do a half range of motion squat because you want to load 5 plates on the side, that is not what we were talking about. That's not at all. But if that knee is done, moving forward, and you want to get deeper, are you getting deeper because you're getting more quad length, or are you getting deeper because you're getting more hip flexion? And that's what you have to assess. Get your phone out. Get off of Facebook during your workouts and get off Instagram and video some of your reps and watch what you're doing.
Yeah. Be a little bit narcissistic when it comes to that. It's okay to kind of break down and see mechanically if things are right. And honestly, even for the people where their goal is that they're just trying to move weight, trust me, Adam and I are both in our 30s now. Those days of moving weight, they're going to eventually catch up to you. And you are going to have to start to think outside of the box. Okay, and that's going to be coming down to paying attention to even the most minute details of what's moving first. Where am I bracing from? Am I holding in air? Am I expelling air going through my squat? Am I active in the bottom of my squat? Where's my intent through? And the list goes on and on. That's things that you're going to have to eventually think about whether you like it or not. If you want to have longevity to training hard, the only way to train hard for longevity is smart.
Yes.
Okay?
It's in your neck of the woods up in Ohio, you have Matt Winning. So I'm going to quote Matt here. Great, great coach. He who trains the longest gets the strongest.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to think about. I used to squat 3 days a week. I'm stronger now in my squat than I ever been, and I squat twice, and they are both not heavy. And yes, I'm a power lifter, and I do safety bar squats, I do hack squats, I do heel elevated squats. I do not always do my low bar squat.
Right, right.
So I do leg extensions, I do leg curls,
Right.
all that.
Let's see if we got anything else. So Danny Galvin asks, for squats, how do you determine if you're going too low, butt to calf? So Adam kind of talked about that, okay? It's tough to really like explain how you assess how far somebody actively can go in their squat, okay? But there's some active range of motion tests that you can do, all right? But a really, really bad cue on a squat, if we're talking about activity in the legs, not an actual like competition style squat, is to think about a destination, all right? That's the first thing in all the stuff when I have clients come in, when campers come in, when people visit the place, is we always preface our training with the fact that I'm not going to teach you movements and I'm not going to talk about destinations. What I'm going to talk to you about is activity and contractions, because after all, if you can't feel it, it's not working, man. You know, it's just not working, okay?
And we have an active range of motion test here, but this is just my own little thing. If you come to camp, I will always do this to you. But everybody goes that ass to grass squat. And so if you've been to camp, you've heard this before. But if anybody has ever been in middle school PE and they had to do those horrible wall sits, and you're sitting there and the coach isn't looking and you start to get tired at the end of wrestling practice, basketball, PE, if you think about an ass to grass squat, can they see me?
Yeah, they can see it.
Cool. So I can sit here all day and I am fine. Spine is neutral and I am fine. This is an ass to grass squat.
He's comfy.
I'm comfy.
He's hanging out.
I'm hanging out. Quads are fine. Oh boy. Now my quads are on. Like this is tension right here. I can't hang out here all day. This is a cop out. This is a bailout. This is very easy. This is just on my SI, my pelvis, and my low back. Right there, I can feel my quads light on fire. That's where I'm going to go on my squat. That's a bailout. This is not. And I'm not going to come down and bounce out of it, pause it, and contract out of it. Whew. That was more than one rep.
Yeah, that's a good like little point is that Adam said about the bounce. If you feel like you have to bounce out of the part of the range of motion of the squat that you're in, you're not active there. Okay, so you're obviously way too deep in that squat. Okay, you need to be in a point. The whole range of motion in any squat you're doing, whether it's hip dominant, competition style, okay, or quad dominant, is that you should at any point in time in your head be able to say, I could comfortably stop anytime I wanted to. Okay, number one, that's going to show that you have control eccentrically like you should. And number two, you're staying within where your legs, whatever the squat may be, can actively contract. Okay?
And that's one thing, even a lot of power lifters and really good powerlifting coaches, when they prescribe a pause squat, sometimes even in the notes, guys, these things are missed, little details. They're sometimes, even in a competitive squatter, they're going to have them pause at the parallel range just because you know that you're on there. And then they don't want to see bounce. They want you to be there and then go up.
Yep.
They don't want to see any go down. So I'm paused and not down and up. It's paused and bring it up. You want to talk about getting a squat very strong, that'll do it.
You're speaking about like hypertrophy and building tension. I mean, if you want muscle to grow, it's got to have tension. Simple as that. That's the purpose of weight. That's the purpose of resistance, is to increase tension in the muscle.
It's a lot of time under tension.
Yeah, and increasing that time under tension, okay? But even more simplistic than that, right, is that if you are bouncing, there is no stinking tension, all right? It's just this energy, this kinetic energy just being dispersed into passive structures.
Passive structures.
All right, so if you want your knees to grow, go for it, man. You know, if you want your elbows to explode, go for it. But our point here is we're trying to create that longevity to what you do, right? By doing everything a little bit smarter, okay? Okay, so Terry's question, I'm reading the whole thing here, Adam.
Okay.
I've never heard about training legs every day. Sounds valid to me. max hypertrophy. So how do they recover, and the stiffness that sets in after, how does that play? Do the quads get forced to grow quicker? Let me kind of lead off on this.
Yeah.
All right, so Terry, so don't overcomplicate it, okay? All we're doing here, like I spoke before, is we're trying to develop the skill, okay? And from, you know, so in order to develop the skill, we're taking the volume of the sets, the total sets in a sense, down, so we can train them every day. So I'm talking like, my people that do body comp style training, that train them very frequently, they don't do 7 sets. So 6 sets is about the top amount of sets that they get for quads in general, okay? Now I may increase the density or the intensity within those sets, but I don't increase the sets too much, okay? That's not like a number you have to stick by, but it's just from the judgment of time of clients that Adam and I have on the floor, okay? As far as stiffness, that's the purpose. It's like you're not really supposed to get too beat up from this. You know, you may be like, they may be a little bit exhausted, okay? But they shouldn't really be that sore because you're inflicting a little bit of damage, but you're not breaking them down with the high volume of sets and reps, and so to speak, okay?
And I think that goes into when it really does come to programming like we do here, is nothing is set in stone. So, and meaning some people say, train my legs every day, and we're, like you said, we're not having these knockdown, drag out leg sessions. You know, somebody goes in and does 6 sets of quads and some press movements. The next day, hamstrings. Well, then I planned on the 3rd day doing quads again. Well, guess what? If you wake up and you're a little beat up, it's an off day. So, well, but that's not the way that I wrote it on paper. Well, you need to evaluate your own training and go, you know what, maybe today's a day that's where you throw in some active recovery measures or do some small body part training, right? Give them a day off. Well, I didn't write that on paper. It's not online. Evaluate your own training. You're a little beaten up, take a day off, and then you'll hit it again. And you'll have a quality session.
Yeah, and like, you know, to add to that, Adam and I both are big advocates personally on journaling in a sense, right? So we have our structured training, and we're on completely different training methodologies, right? But we still journal alike, and the reason for that is you know, it's not just to write down how great my session was. What it is like I'm evaluating post-session during the day, the next morning, you know, how I feel. I'm putting it on paper because if I see it written on paper that I feel like garbage, okay, I'm probably going to compute it a little bit better in my brain to be more accountable to the fact that, oh my gosh, like maybe I do need to take today off, right? So like rigidity with flexibility is going to be the best thing that you can do as far as like training things frequently, you know, go. I have a set schedule, Adam has a set schedule, but probably every session I veer off the beaten path a little bit just because I'm reading my biofeedback consistently, okay?
And with something like that, if you're going to start to go to a higher frequency, start conservative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, start
Let's
low.
say, hey, I'm going to do one exercise that I can feel for 4 sets. And the next day you evaluate. I don't feel too bad, so let's add to it. If you start conservative in something like that, there's always somewhere to go and progress to.
Yeah. So we have a question here from Matej. If I screwed your name up, I'm sorry.
Matesh?
Yeah.
He's probably from Missouri.
Matej, are you from Missouri?
Yeah.
Anyway,
South St. Louis.
It says, do you have any specific criteria for setting tempo in both the eccentric and concentric phase?
A tempo for the eccentric and
concentric.
Yeah. What is your goal?
Yeah.
What is your goal? Hypertrophy. Hypertrophy.
So it's a very loaded question. Okay.
Yes.
But I will speak on the fact of legs. Okay. So let's go back to quads. So let's assume all you guys tuning in, like your quad training is lackluster and you're trying to make it better. One thing that I will say is that for the beginning of whatever your exercise selection is in the beginning of the workout. So let's say we're going to go right away. We're going to go into a hack squat, right? Number 1, it's stable. Number 2, it's a big range of motion. Number 3, I can get a massive amount of output out of it when I'm fresh, okay? But I'm not very wired in. I'm not very efficient with my quads, okay? What's an easy way for me to become more efficient? Well, eccentrically, I'm going to slow my tempo down like crazy. So the average tempo for most people is like 2 to 3 seconds max through the eccentric. So why don't we double it? Why don't we make it a 6-second eccentric? I'm forcing my body. Maybe in the beginning my body's going to use my hands and my glutes. to resist that eccentric because they're stronger, okay? They're more active, but eventually I guarantee by rep 3, rep 4, those quads are going to have to really start in and start to work like they have to, you know, and you may start the beginning of your workout doing very, very slow eccentrics with normal concentric tempos. So we don't really change the concentric too much. The only thing that I will say with clients is maybe I make them be a little bit more what I call patient at the beginning of the motion, which would be going eccentrically to concentrically to keep them from exploding and getting weight floating.
No bounce.
No bouncing,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah, because again, we want to keep that resistance driving against the working muscle all the time. If I get it floating through space, it's not giving me any resistance at that point in time, okay? So again, it's energy that's gone from where it needs to be.
And I think there is something, guys, if you, not to get off into a lecture, but within the individual rep itself, the eccentric and concentric, both are contractions. People need to realize they're contractions, and there's different things chemically going on there. But when you talk hypertrophy and you want to get what's mechanical damage, one of the key components of hypertrophy, that occurs during the eccentric. And that is important. So if I'm trying to get a very big muscle, and I need all those little micro tears so that when I go home and eat and rest, they build back bigger and stronger
Right.
for the next workout, I better spend some time in the eccentric. You know, and that goes for strength too. I can get into a whole thing neurological with strength on why the eccentric is important. But just from a hypertrophy standpoint and a novice standpoint, if you can't control it on the way down, how the hell are you going to do it on the way up?
Right.
So load it and control it. You know, and the eccentric portion of the rep is where there's more damage. There's more tears. And if I'm trying to get big legs, control the eccentric. If I see somebody go down and come up really quick, I'm going, you just missed 60% of the rep.
Yep.
Just to throw the number out,
Yep.
60%. Over 50. I would say that's how important
sure.
the eccentric
For
is.
sure.
And there is some news, if anybody follows, I forget his name, but his last name is Beardsley on Instagram. He just posted a bunch of stuff with graphs on eccentric training and how vital it was versus somebody that did concentric only. And there is a bunch to say that how strength gains were so important with overloaded eccentrics. As far as tempo, yeah, so guys, if you're a novice having a hard time, any muscle, take some time in the eccentric. It will just add so much value right there and growth.
Yeah, and in addition to the tempo, like if you don't want to count tempo, don't count it, but realize that the goal of tempo is to increase tension, right? So once you unrack that weight in the hack squat, since that was our example, okay, rep 1 to rep 10, if that's my prescribed reps, there is no stinking time off. There's no time off. There's no break at the top when my joints are stacked. There's no pause, relaxed pause in the bottom, right? There's tension throughout the whole thing. And all tempo is there for is to delegate that tension, right? So that's the ultimate goal on top of the tension. Is like what tempo is it going to take for me to ensure that I've got maximum tension from rep 1 to rep 10. So I know I'm going to get this name wrong. It's Orlaith, okay? But she asks a question.
Illinois.
She asks she asks a question about nutrition. Okay, now Adam and I really aren't even going to dive into nutrition here. Okay, he and I are a little bit more experts in execution. Okay, you're asking directly about carbohydrates during the session. Okay,
Depends.
It depends. Yeah. So
What's your goal?
It's
What's your insulin sensitivity?
Right.
What's your gut health?
Right. If
How you sleeping?
if your goal is body fat loss, kind of like it looks like it is here, okay, I would be very, very conservative with the carbohydrates that you take in the workout, okay? If you're going to have carbohydrates, probably post-workout, and if you can take carbohydrates, if you do well with them eventually, maybe pre-vet, okay? But at that point in time, carbohydrates are going to kind of be your worst enemy as far as keeping muscle tissue, using the right nutrients at the right times.
And what type of training are you doing?
And the type of training. So,
Not to get on a soapbox, but if you're a power lifter eating honey buns in the middle of your workout, that doesn't fuel anything.
yeah.
We're not producing lactate.
And that's a good point because, like, I feel like there's this universal obsession with diet right now, and honestly, my mindset is backwards to that. I think that training is everything, right? If you're not eliciting the amount of, like, some kind of stimulus in your training, or if you're not super efficient in your training, you don't earn nutrition. Like, you can't even think about nutrition, okay? Because it's not going to do you any good to count numbers at that point in time and know your macros and carb cycle and all this garbage, right? You got to do the beginning thing first. You have to create this deficit in your training before you can even think about getting specific with what you're having where, right? So for a lot of the people that we have that don't do a good job with their training in the beginning, they're just newbies. They don't eat a lot, guys, okay? They don't need a lot. And then as they get better, their metabolism kicks up. They're like, hey, I'm hungry. And they start to get more food, okay? So you have to assess that. Again, that's such a person-to-person thing. We don't have one person in here that's eating the same thing. It's eating the same carbs. It's on the same carb cycling protocol. That start at the same spot. That has the same stressors. I mean, it's very, very in-depth.
And I think that's actually, we're going to throw another shameless plug here. Coach Cassim teaches a nutrition course now. We just had our first one for 2 days, and we dive into that.
Yeah.
He dives into that.
Yeah.
We just all listen when
Yeah.
he talks. But I think one thing that you will get out of that, and if you realize this, your nutrition needs to match the training stimulus. And they both go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So if you're eating the same and then you change your training stimulus and you don't change your nutrition to match that, it's a fail.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to be as beneficial as
Absolutely.
it could be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Things do go hand in hand. So that they're on a linear path in a sense as far as the changes go. So last question, guys. I'm going to pick this one just because this is good for you, Adam. So Luis asks, is it necessary to work on mobility and flexibility drills? I know that many powerlifters do that before squatting. Notice Adam's smiling really bright right now.
How much time do we have on this?
So Adam's he's going to answer this here in 90 seconds.
Good luck
Go.
with that. Okay. There's been tons and tons and tons of research recently just put out on foam rolling and things like that, on crossball rolling. And guys, it's a perception of feeling better, but when you actually measure it, it's really not doing much at all. But you feel a little bit better doing it, but as far as what it's actually doing to the muscle or fascia, that has yet to be seen. Now, the research that supports things like soft tissue work, that supports it, that has been done by trained specialists. We're talking people that know what they're doing when they get in there with their hands and work and they find what's going on. That is something entirely different than jabbing a lacrosse ball or a foam roller into something. But also you need to realize that if you're giving a joint or something a newfound range, it might be very, very weak there.
There you go.
Too. So you have to I'm not really big into stretching and like doing a bunch of things before I squat. What I am going to do is activate things. So why does somebody's hamstring feel taut or tight? You know, things like that. They're weak. They're lengthened. Tighten them. Quit stretching them. You know, use your glutes. Activate. What things are going on? I'm going to get some glute activation in the short position. I'm going to activate my hamstrings. Things like that. You know, people feel better when they stretch. Like, let's say they do this hip opening drill and they're on the ground doing this crazy thing with their hips all open, and like, oh, that feels good. Well, think about what actually externally rotates your hip. That's weak. Strengthen and activate that instead of forcing it into an unfound range. You know, so activate.
Yeah,
not necessarily.
That's the best advice you're going to get, guys. It's like, okay, when you think of something being tight, we've been taught since we were kids, stretch it, okay? But honestly, tightness is weakness, okay? It is weakness of that muscle.
Right.
So the easiest thing you can do is train it, strengthen it, right? Find ways, like we've been talking about, of getting that muscle into its extremes. It doesn't even have to be under load in the beginning because that muscle's going to be so weak it may not even be able to take it. But find ways to get it completely contracted, find ways to get it completely lengthened, and spend time doing that prior to whatever session it may be. This goes for all muscle groups, okay? I have never had a person that's come in and says, oh, I've got this tight it's, you know, it gives me so much pain, I just have tight hamstrings. And I'm like, nah, you just have weak hamstrings, man. And then all of a sudden, that magic word of mobility, they have more of it.
Right.
All of us like magically, it's like voodoo, right? Just because it got stronger.
Well, and if you think, and we've heard this for years now too. They go, somebody wants to come in and train their chest beginning of the workout. We would know, I'm going to train chest, So they go in and they start stretching it, like really stretching it before they train it. We know not to do that because it tones it down, it inhibits it. So you stretch it, it's going to be slightly weaker.
Right.
Weaker. So now people are doing some of these things with their hips and stuff and not realizing that when you're stretching it, you could be inhibiting it. In the bottom of a squat, I don't want anything inhibited because I've stretched it. So what, okay, take that same stretch in the pec and stretch it, and they're like, wait a minute, instead of stretching my pec, here's an idea. I'm going to tighten my back and strengthen my back, and that will do something for you.
Yeah, so all Adam's talking about there is like the antagonistic muscle group. Sometimes that's the pathway to help with something that's tight. Is by getting that muscle short, in a sense, it can help with weakness on the chest side here.
And I will, one last thing though, on mobility and things like that though, if there is a time and place for it, after your workout.
Right.
There's a lot, and there's actually really good breathing drills to do on the floor and stretching and mobility work like that you've seen. At the end of the workout, when you're done, I think that is perfectly fine. You're not going to go load that thing anymore.
Right.
Okay.
There's no issue with turning it off. It may actually help recovery at that point
Oh,
a
yeah,
little bit, right?
absolutely.
So, but thanks for tuning in, guys. Take
Thanks,
care.
guys.